Okay, I think it's time. It's gone 3 o'clock. I think we'll make a start. Laura, are you able to hear me all right?
Loud and clear, Kate.
Lovely. Then we'll make a start. So, welcome to our first Medical Needs in Schools Suffolk workshop. As I said earlier, we are aware that there are quite a few schools that are unable to join us at this time. So we are recording this event so that we can put it on our Radworld Trust website. So welcome to those that are here now, and an extended welcome to those that will be watching or listening to this later on. If you do have any questions, please put them in the chat bar as the presentation goes along, and if time, hopefully we'll address those at the end, or email responses if greater response is needed. So this is the statutory guidance in supporting children with medical needs in schools and also individual healthcare plans. Our aim for this session is to be supportive, concise, and to deliver the information you need in order to support this group of students in your setting, and to ensure that you're complying, of course, with your statutory duties. It should last no longer than 30 minutes. And as I said before, you will need access to pen, paper, or perhaps your mobile phone to take a screenshot or a picture of one of the slides coming up. So just to introduce myself, I'm Kate Kingston. I'm the lead teacher at Ipswich Hospital. I'll be talking to you this afternoon about statutory guidance. My co-presenter today is Dr. Helen Griffiths, a consultant psychologist from Oxford University Hospital, who will be sharing with you information pertinent to the individual healthcare plans, or the IHPs, as some of you will know them in short, not to be confused with EHCP. Okay, so let's start.
Kate, hi, it's Helen here. Just wanted to let you know there's a bit of an issue with the audio. I don't know whether you want to turn your video off to try and reduce the bandwidth.
Okay, I'm having a bit of an issue actually with my PowerPoint presentation as well. So
your audio is coming through loud and clear now. So that seems to have helped with the video going off. And thanks for everybody in the chat alerting us to that.
Lovely, thank you. I hope that's better. Please do let me know if there's a problem.
Yeah, that suddenly seems a lot better, but please do let us know in the chat if anyone is struggling.
Thanks, Helen. As you're aware, I don't have access while I'm presenting, while I'm screen sharing with you, to be able to see the chat, but Helen will interrupt me, I'm sure, as we go on. Okay, so statutory duty, where does this come from and how has this come about? So in section 100 of the Children and Families Act 2014, it places a duty on governing bodies of all schools to make arrangements for supporting pupils at their school with medical conditions, in line with guidance from the Secretary of State. Springboarding from this act, shortly afterwards, published in December 2015, was this aptly named document, Supporting Pupils at School with Medical Conditions. So this was published, as I said, December 2015. It's this document that provides us with all the detail that we need to fulfil our statutory duties and beyond. Further to the statutory information, it gives us detailed guidance and advice for us to follow. So if you don't have a copy, please do download it. It will be great support to you as governors, head teachers, and medical needs in school leads. Please also note that when we talk about medical needs, we are talking about both physical and mental health needs. So who is responsible in this document? So it's quiz time. Please make sure that you either take a photo of this screen or you quickly jot down the headings on this slide on a piece of paper. These are your multiple choice answers, and you'll need to select an answer from this list. What you're about to see are extracts from the document that I've just shown you, supporting pupils at school with medical conditions. Your task is to identify who is responsible for each section. We were going to do this interactively, but we've decided against it today with the difficulties perhaps of keeping a nice flow, jumping in and out, muting, unmuting, hands up, forgetting you put your hands up. You know the problems and the constraints we have when we try to do things virtually. But please do play along. This is the information that you need to know from the document, and it's relevant to obviously why we're here today. So the task is to identify who is responsible for each section. These are the answers. Let's do the first one together. Hopefully you've had time to quickly jot those down while I've been talking. Off we go. So who is responsible? Have a quick read of this slide. Those of you watching in groups, perhaps you could discuss amongst yourselves. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to decide on a possible answer. And here is the response. So it's highlighted in red. It's the governing bodies that are responsible. Okay, over to you now. I'm going to show you the next slide, and you need to come up with one of the answers on the slide. So hopefully you can see how this works. Okay, so the response is as follows. It's the head teacher. Next one. Notice I've put in bold key partners and should be involved in the development and review of the child's individual healthcare plan. I think this should be fairly straightforward. It's the parents. And the next one. Best place to provide information about how their condition affects them. I think this should be fairly obvious, but often overlooked. Should be fully involved in discussions. Hopefully you've all got this one. It's the pupils themselves. The next one, I think this is a given. Please do read the information. And I'm sure you've got the right answer for this one. It's obviously school staff. So hopefully you've picked out some information there that should help you know exactly what your responsibilities are, those of you who are school staff. Have a look at this one. Okay, this is where our role of the school nursing staff comes in to help with training and also liaising with schools, even hopefully before the child even starts at school. Let's have a look at the next one. Okay, those of you that are just joining, we are in the middle of a quiz at the moment, so we are recording. You can look back and see what this is all about. And the answer is other health professionals. And finally, I think you should only have one answer left, but it's interesting to pick out, look at the bold and see what this particular body's responsibility actually is. I think the final paragraph is particularly interesting, and I'm sure it wasn't a surprise to you to note points frozen again. Sorry about that. It was the local authority. Okay, so the end of the quiz, how did you do? And what did you learn? Obviously, to find out more, please do read the guidance supporting pupils at school with medical conditions. There are 3 key points to this. Pupils at school with medical conditions should be properly supported so that they have full access to education, including school trips, physical education. Governing bodies, though I would argue it's everyone's responsibility, must ensure that arrangements are in place in schools to support pupils at school with medical conditions. These arrangements are wholly individual and need to be considered with all stakeholders. Another key point is that governing bodies should ensure that school leaders consult health and social care professionals, pupils and parents to ensure that the needs of children with medical conditions are properly understood and effectively supported. Schools should develop a policy for supporting pupils with medical conditions, ensuring it is reviewed regularly and is readily accessible to parents and school staff. It should set out the procedures to be followed whenever a school is notified that a pupil has a medical condition. Crucially, reintegration back into school should be properly supported so that children with medical conditions fully engage with learning and they don't fall behind when they're unable to attend. Pupils will be absent for medical appointments, and ideally this should not be held against them in terms of receiving attendance awards like their peers, for example. And this is something for schools to consider. Support for absent pupils should be carefully planned in terms of work sent home, catch-up classes, for example. And finally, an important point, schools do not have to wait for a formal diagnosis before providing support to pupils. Often formal diagnoses take years, as we know, and that's a long time for a vulnerable child to be unsupported. A child with a medical need can have an IHP, for example, instigated by the school at any point if it's deemed necessary. The last couple of slides before I hand over to Helen look at particularly key aspects of the policy. This will be a reminder perhaps to governors, head teachers, medical needs in school leads about what you should include in your school's policy. But don't panic if you currently don't have one. We can provide you with a model policy through medical needs in schools that you can adopt and revise as necessary for your setting. So for now, as a checklist, here's what you need to be thinking about. So school policy, make sure you have one. A named person. Who is your school's medical needs in schools lead? Who is your perhaps mental health first aider, could be included here. And do you have a named mental health first aid champion in your school? Training. Your policy should include a section on training, details of any medical needs training, including mental health training, what training is needed in your school, identify any specialist support, involvement of the school nursing team, for example. How does your school ensure staff are suitably trained? Under awareness, outline the school procedures here for your medical needs protocols. Who needs to be aware? How will you make sure everyone who needs to know about a child's information is informed, but at the same time maintaining confidentiality if needed, reducing stigma and conforming to parents' and child's wishes, for example. Reintegration. How will your pupils be supported while absent from school, and crucially, what support will be offered to reintegrate them? How will absences be managed? Risk assessments we're all familiar with. When a child is ready to return, who will write these? What information will be required? And finally, individual healthcare plans. What's the school's policy on these? And include an agreed template in your policy. Questions that the policy requires the school to answer are listed here. How does the medical condition impact on school life? What impact does the medical condition have on a child's ability to learn? How can the school increase the child's confidence and support self-care? And what are the child's physical, social and emotional needs? By using IHPs successfully, these questions will be automatically answered. So I'm going to hand over to Helen now, who's going to share with you the information about IHPs and their important role in answering these questions and in supporting children with their medical needs. Over to you, Helen.
Thanks, Kate. Like Kate said, I'm Helen Griffiths, consultant clinical psychologist based at the Children's Hospital in Oxford, and I've been working with the Medical Needs in Schools Oxfordshire project for the past almost 3 years now. I'm going to talk a little bit about individual healthcare plans, just a few bits and pieces, though do let me know if my sound drops out, and please do use the chat for any questions or comments. And if you don't mind, I'm going to keep my video off just because it seems to be helping with bandwidth today. So apologies that you can't actually see me, but maybe that's a good thing, I don't know. So we'll get started. Next slide, please, Kate. Thank you. So as you've listened to Kate's talk, I guess something to reflect on is how many of you are confident in using individual healthcare plans in your school, and how many of you are confident that your school is following the DFE guidance currently. When we started this project in Oxfordshire, we found that at the launch event just like this, there was about 20% of our schools that attended that had a plan in place that was in line with the DFE guidance. And actually the national picture is pretty similar, with some recent research showing that only around 17% of schools have all of the adequate supports in place using this guidance to support children with medical needs. So got us thinking, what can we do to support schools to think about individual healthcare plans as a useful tool in the care of children with medical conditions, in supporting their education? Because let's face it, we're in a resource and time pushed period at the moment, and nobody needs any additional paperwork without being convinced that it's going to have a helpful use. Next slide, please, Kate. Thanks. So when we started talking to schools about implementing an individual healthcare plan, we came across some really common reactions. So many people thought that my accent was just saying AHCP in a funny way, and sort of corrected me that this child won't meet the need for an AHCP, really underlining that it wasn't a commonly understood tool that we could be using in schools. Many people didn't know what an IHP was. They hadn't heard of one. Certainly within the hospital system, we hadn't heard of one. And I hadn't heard of one till I started working much more closely with my education colleagues. Then people moved into a space where it sounds great in principle, but it is a lot of extra work. It's more paperwork, it's things to review, and it takes a lot of coordination. And really, what's the point if this young person doesn't need any medicine? Isn't that what this is about? And I guess through our work in medical needs in schools, we've really come to see the individual healthcare plan as a tool that can support the holistic needs of a child with a medical condition in school and really work towards optimal educational, psychological and physical health outcomes for young people with these additional needs. Thanks, Kate. Is it frozen again? Ah, there you go. Great. So why do we use an IHP, an individual healthcare plan? So really any child with a medical condition can have one. It's instigated by school, but more and more we're working with our health colleagues to think about their role in supporting school with getting these up and running. And they're really to delineate what are the ongoing supports, the monitoring needs and the interventions that children need during the school days to support their medical condition. And we really hope that if we can do this in a holistic way, including the child, the family, and the healthcare providers in this process, we can really reduce the impact on education of the medical condition. Thanks, Kate. So what goes in an IHP? If you've never seen one, the DFE guidance that Kate has talked about has a template at the back, and there are lots and lots of condition-specific templates which you'll find on the MNIS website. So many of the charities have devised some really nice looking documents, and you can create your own specific to that child's needs. But I think there are some key things that should go in the IHP. So medication arrangements, description of the physical and psychological impacts of the condition, thinking about what supports are needed and what reasonable adjustments should be made. And that can include things like when a child has been off for a day for a hospital appointment, do they like to sort of be asked direct questions by others about that? Where have you been? What was that for? Or do they like not to be asked questions and for teachers to disseminate information? That can be really easily sorted out through year group time, for example. So some of those practical things that really helps that young person adjust back into school and feel comfortable to manage the difference that their healthcare condition might make them feel. What are their regular and ad hoc appointments? So this can help to delineate some of the confusion, and often, particularly in psychology, we get asked, can you provide evidence of this appointment for school and so on? And having all this in an IHP in terms of the frequency, the regularity, allows for a lot more planning of when a young person needs to be out of school without the need necessarily to always be evidencing that each and every time. And that can reduce the burden on parents. And setting out what is needed for a smooth transition, perhaps when a young person is going between sort of hospital school and their home school, for example, or maybe having periods where they're at home because of their illness. Thanks, Kate. So we found individual healthcare plans much more helpful when young people are not optimally accessing education. So, for example, maybe their condition means that they possibly could get to school, but there are other barriers impacting on their ability to, such as anxiety, mood, maybe some concerns about what a young person is able to do at school, concerns about the school environment perhaps, and how that is set up for the young person's needs. And it can really help when there is some uncertainty about what is the medical condition or advice, and can really be quite containing for schools and teachers who are often having to make difficult day-by-day decisions about, do I send somebody home? What do I do in this circumstance? Really helps to contain the whole system around the child, that everyone is on the same page and everyone is in agreement with the advice that has been provided by the medical team and what impact that has on a child's day-to-day education. Thanks, Kate. So here's some examples of children that we might suggest might benefit from an IHP. So I'm not going to go through them all in detail. I think it would be possibly a bit arduous to necessarily do an IHP for every child with a medical condition. There might be other things in school that can be utilised to greater effect, like a risk assessment, for example. However, in theory, any child with a medical condition could have an IHP. So I think it's thinking about what is that child's needs. Have we thought about the psychological impact? We know that children with perhaps less severe conditions that are not life-threatening, perhaps we might think, well, that maybe there's less of a psychological impact. But actually what we know from the research is that often there are many other factors that impact on psychological adjustment to a health condition. So perhaps other factors outside of their health that might make them more prone to anxiety or depression in the context of their health. So have we really done a holistic assessment involving all of the people involved in a child's care in what the plan should look like? So there's some situations maybe where a child has an EHCP where we think actually all of the needs are encapsulated in that EHCP. And there's some circumstances where the EHCP might not capture some of the more the detailed and psychological aspects of what that child needs, perhaps to feel less different, less singled out because of their health, that an IHP might capture. So thinking about these examples here, there's probably going to be an argument for most of these young people to receive an IHP, but certainly it's possible to take an individual approach to whether that's needed in conjunction with discussion with the family too. Thank you, Kate. So as I say, you know, it might be that you have a risk assessment in place, something a bit more specific that thinks about keeping the child and others safe, but the risk assessment might not sufficiently support with thinking about access to activities, thinking about how to talk about the child's health condition, what supports the young person might need with perhaps the social and emotional aspects of school and so on. And that's where an IHP can really complement and incorporate the risk assessment as part of an overarching document, to think a little bit more in detail about what are their psychological, emotional, social needs, in addition to some of the practicalities of their health. Thanks, Kate. So what will a good IHP do? So a good IHP will reduce the feeling of difference that a young person has. So maybe thinking about some of the ways that the young person's health needs are communicated within the wider school, maybe thinking about the pastoral programme and how you can incorporate assemblies and learning about difference at a whole school level. Can help to aid school reintegration so that there's a plan in place whenever a young person has to have time off school. And we know that that smooth reintegration will only help with attainment and achievement. We know that if the child's healthcare needs are well managed in school, that will impact on their overall management of their healthcare needs and their long-term health outcomes. So, for example, making sure that we all know when a child needs to be sent home from school and when they would benefit from maybe some time in a different space, or when they can be helped in the classroom. In the long term, that will support the whole system's management of the child's health. We know that if we can get this right at a psychological and emotional level, this will impact on the young person's self-esteem and their social opportunities. So getting it right, even if a young person isn't able to attend class, thinking about break times, lunch times and so on, and how using technology that we've become a lot more familiar with recently can help to promote that sense of inclusion in school. And of course, we're all very mindful of resource, and sometimes when we don't have a plan in place that's been discussed and agreed with all of the relevant stakeholders, we can end up being counterproductive with many of our efforts and take a lot more time doing things that maybe are unnecessary or unhelpful. So getting it right through clear delineation in the IHP will help to use resources across the school effectively too. Thank you, Kate. So here's some examples of how we've set out our IHPs in Oxfordshire, particularly for some of the young people where their needs might not be so sort of well defined with a diagnosis perhaps, and where there might be some differences of understanding across the whole system of what a child needs and why. So we've used this what, why and who format to try and delineate the what is being sort of put in place for the young person, the rationale for that, and whose responsibility it is to see that it's attended to, and really to reduce confusion in the system and to prevent any inconsistencies in managing situations. So here's Leo. So he was given 30 minutes of English and maths per day, and that was to be completed at home when he couldn't attend school owing to his fatigue. And really this was to ensure he had a consistent level of activity every day to help with his fatigue management. So even though we didn't put the onus on him being in school, there was a backup plan of a consistent time each day to manage his fatigue. We got sign off from the medical team that that was an appropriate level of activity for Leo, and the class teacher arranged to provide mum with that work at the beginning of the week, and mum to drop it in at the end of the week. So again, everybody's responsibility is shared and clearly outlined here, so that we all know who's responsible for which bit of the plan. Catherine was given a lunchtime pass because she, even though she was physically fit to stand in a queue, she had a lot of stresses in her life at that particular moment. And so what was happening was the sort of some of the noise and the what was considered to be banter in the queue was stressing Catherine out, and she was having a meltdown. And so giving her a lunchtime pass, I think, seemed counterintuitive in some ways, because it felt like we were sort of avoiding the problem. But I think given her circumstances, whilst Catherine was working on supporting her own emotional well-being to deal with the stresses, that was deemed the most appropriate course of action. So the head of year provided the pass to Catherine and communicated that to the lunchtime staff, and the lunchtime staff were to feed back if the pass was being improperly used. So there was some concern that Catherine might go out at a break time and sort of use it just to sneak in at the end and get something to eat. And we made it really clear that from a behavioural point of view, we needed to monitor that, and it wasn't sort of a free rein to utilise sort of outside of the usual behavioural rules within the school. Thanks, Kate. So I think schools get a lot of demands placed on them from healthcare professionals. So myself, I'm always asking things of schools. I know the doctors are always asking things of schools, and it's so difficult to accommodate these, particularly at the moment with the many restrictions that COVID is placing on the school environment. And these are just some of the things that I know schools get asked a lot to do, and having an IHP will really help to think about, okay, what is necessary, what is optimal if you can, what's the rationale behind it, how can we troubleshoot this, how can we ensure that resource is effectively used where a resource is limited. And all of this can be delineated within the IHP and discussed as a whole team with the professionals that are asking for these things, to really make sure that we're not overburdening any part of the system, and that the things that we're asking for will make a difference to that young person. Thanks, Kate. So ordinarily, again, if we were doing this face-to-face in more sort of typical times, we might be talking through some IHPs right now and asking you to think about these questions here. But in the absence of being able to do that, it might be that you can bring to mind some young people that you know in your school system with medical needs, and thinking about, okay, well, what are the impacts of the medical needs on education, and also on other aspects of well-being. So how might that young person feel in their school environment when they have to maybe go and do an injection, go and have a drink of water, have a special toilet pass, and so on, and what do we need to do to mitigate them feeling different? What are the kinds of things you might need to think about in your setting? What are the things that are being asked of you by the healthcare professionals? And how can you implement that in a way that doesn't overburden your system? And how can we think creatively? And again, hopefully through the course of the Medical Needs in Schools project, we'll be able to share some ideas of really creative ways that schools have told us that they've worked with different requests to make it happen. What are the supports and resources do you have to inform your work? So do you feel well supported by the system that you work in? Do you have access to correct templates, resources? Do you know how to get hold of your local hospital team if you need information? How easy is it for you to implement and enact on some of these things? And how does all of this translate into an IHP for this particular child? And there are some sample IHPs, as I say, there's one in the DFE guidance, and there's many online that we can share with you to think about what questions to ask, what are the details that you need to get to make it most functional, and how to get some of the information gaps that you might need to fill in. Thanks, Kate. So I think that's pretty much it for me. I haven't noticed any questions popping up in the chat. I don't know if there is anything that people want to ask or comment on. If you want to add that to the chat as I hand over to Kate to sum up, and if we have time at the end, I will pick up on any questions that pop up in the chat. Thanks, and over to you, Kate.
Thank you, Helen. So really moving forward, how can Medical Needs in Schools support? We have pre-planned workshops involving local and national clinical colleagues, and I'm going to show you the list of those very soon in the next slide. Self-evaluation, schools that have signed up to our Medical Needs in Schools partnership, you will receive in the post or via email a paper copy, or if you've requested access to the app, this will be information about this will be emailed to you. You obviously have Medical Needs in Schools support, so if you do want to get in touch, I will put the details up. You have our Medical Needs in Schools email address, and obviously moving forward we have the mental health first aid training into the new year. I was talking about the Medical Needs in School workshops that are coming up. These are by no means all of them. We have got more that are lined up, but these are the ones where the dates have been confirmed. So obviously today we are doing the statutory guidance individual healthcare plans, but coming up soon, the 12th of November, as a note for your diary, we have Dr. Jackie Buck, who is our local consultant paediatrician that works at Ipswich Hospital, who will be providing half an hour workshop on puberty and growth, what is normal. And on the same date, so you get a double whammy, we have Claire Wadden. Many of you will know her anyway, the lead paediatric nurse specialist for diabetes. Then coming up, we have our Oxfordshire colleagues delivering on the 18th of November pain management. 30th of November, we have one of our paediatric junior doctors, Carla Cantica, who is going to be talking about gender dysphoria. And then we have Oxford colleagues again in December, South Palm, and over into March, way away, isn't it? Eating disorders, our local eating disorder team will be offering a workshop there, but there are others in between December and March that we are yet to confirm. If you watch this space, all that information will be emailed to you. So finally, just thank you for listening, everyone. There are contact details as promised, and website is below where you can find further information about medical needs in School Suffolk. Helen, unless there are any questions that you're aware of, anything come up in the chat bar?
Thanks, Kate. I know that just for your end bit there, things started going a bit quiet again, and thank you for mentioning that in the chat. So we'll pick up on that for the next seminar to see what we can do about the sound. So apologies for that. And hopefully you got to see Kate's outline of the upcoming workshops and do look on our website for any further update and email us for any further info. So Kate, I just thought I'd reiterate that because I know you went very quiet on the audio again, so just in case people didn't hear that. But that's all I've got to say, and thank you very much for listening. We've just had one pop up, Kate, which is probably either best dealt with by yourself or we can email around. Could you explain how the mental health first aid training will work? So I'm assuming, Kate, that's probably a practical question about how that will function. I don't know if you can answer that now.
Yes, hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm really sorry about the sound quality. Can you hear me okay? Because I've got a lot of feedback.
Yeah, you're dipping in and out, but you're just about hearable for this question.
Okay, I'll just have to take my earpiece out. So yes, the medical needs in schools, the mental health first aid training. Once you've done your self-evaluation and we have made contact regarding that, then we can start to book you onto the 2-day courses that we will be publishing in January, February, March time. So there are courses running throughout those 3 months. I believe the November course is full. There might be a few spaces. So obviously we'll just discuss individually with different schools and obviously tailor your needs to whatever it is that you need. Okay, so please do email us at the Radwell Trust Medical Needs in Schools address, which is above. Apologies everyone for the sound quality. I'm obviously talking from Ipswich Hospital and sometimes the server's not very good at all. So I do apologise, but I hope you've got the gist. And thank you very much everyone for attending today.
Thank you everyone. Bye.